All right, I'm gonna do a quick little video tonight, Wednesday night. I don't remember when I do this, but just reading over some St Maximus and thought that I would kind of share some things with you, some thoughts. You always read and find new things. When you read the same thing 100, 1,000 times, you'll find something new. So again, in the responding kind of to the general ethos of the orthosphere, of the e-orthosphere, right, what people are saying on the internet, talking about potentiality in God, first principles in God, kind of dividing God up into these parts. This, the Father is first principle, and then, he's not principle, the Son is principle, and all those other things. Let's go and see what St. Maximus actually has to say. This is from the 1st century on the theology of the Son. You can find this in the Philokalia. It also is his own book, but I'm just going to read 1, 2, and 3. I'm also going to read 2 different translations. I have one on my phone, and I'll read this one here that I've screenshot. This is 1. God is one without first principle, incomprehensible, throughout being the total potentiality of being. He excludes absolutely the concept of temporal or qualified existence, since he is inaccessible to everyone and not discernible to any being as a result of natural reflection. I'll read the other translation that I have to compare the two. God is one, unoriginate, incomprehensible, possessing completely the total potentiality of being, altogether excluding notions of when and how, and accessible to all, and not to be known through natural image by any creature. I'll go on to 2. God is not in himself as much as is possible for us to know a first principle, nor an intermediary state, nor an end, nor any other of those concepts that are in nature observed in what is after him. For he is indefinite, immobile, and infinite, since he is infinitely beyond substance, potentiality, and actuality. This other translation, so far as we are able to understand for himself, God does not constitute either an origin or an intermediary state or a consummation or anything else at all which can be seen to qualify naturally things that are sequent to him. For he is undetermined, unchanging, and infinite, since he is infinitely beyond all being, potentiality, and actualization. I'll go and read 3. I actually don't have the full translation here sitting in front of me, but I'll read the beginning part of 3 on this translation, and then I'll read 3 on this other translation. Each substance, including its own definition in itself, is a first principle by nature, productive of the movement discerned and potentiality in it. Each natural motion towards actuality, conceptualized as after substance yet prior to actuality, is an intermediary state, since in nature it divides both as that which mediates between them. And the other translation, every being whose self-limitation is intrinsic to it by its nature, the origin of the activity perceived as potentially present within it. Every natural activity in the process of actualization and such activity is, on the conceptual level, sequent to the being itself, but prior to its own actualization, is an intermediary state, since by nature it lies between the being in which it is present potentially and its own actualization. Every actualization, limited as it naturally is by its own inner principle, is the consummation of that activity, which has its origin in the being and which, conceptually speaking, precedes the actualization. I think it's actually important to go on, and I'll read 4. Again, I only have it in this particular translation on my phone. God is not a being either in the general or in any specific sense of the word, and so he cannot be an origin. Nor is he a potentiality either in the general or in any specific sense, and so he is not an intermediary state. Nor is he an actualization in the general or in any specific sense, and so he cannot be the consummation of that activity which proceeds from a being in which it is perceived to pre-exist as a potentiality. On the contrary, he is the author of being and simultaneously an entity transcending being. He is the author of potentiality and simultaneously the ground transcending potentiality. And he is the active and inexhaustible state of all actualization. In short, he is the author of all being, potentiality, and actualization, and of every origin, intermediary state, and consummation. Okay. So here, God is not potentiality. right? Very, very clearly stated. Okay. I remember some people were saying in God there's potentiality, and no, there just simply is not. We have to be very, very careful when we read the translations here. I know Emil shared with me a really interesting forward where the author goes over, or the translator of his translation goes over the word dynamis, which is the word that is often translated for potential. So if you see the word potentiality, it will often be coming from the word dynamis. And this is the author, the translator in his forward. The term dynamis I have rendered in numerous ways, since it can have different context-based meanings. The four general renditions I have employed are power, potentiality, capacity, and faculty. This term functions to indicate vital force and its connatural abilities, potentiality in opposition to actuality within a clearly Aristotelian framework, as inherent capacities, the foregoing, to designate faculties able to carry out certain tasks. Sorry, I'm sorry, I messed it up. As inherent capacities the soul and body have, and similarly, but not exactly identically, to the foregoing, to designate faculties able to carry out certain tasks. Okay, so we have this word dynamis, and dynamis is, if we think of the word potent, okay, so potent can either has multiple connotations itself, can mean strength or power, as in that drink was really potent. Can also mean potency, right? As in you have the power to do something. Okay, so we have to be very, very careful. I know it was brought up, to me in a thread some months ago that St. Gregory Palamas says that God has potentiality. This is not true. He uses the word dynamis, and he's using it more akin to an English word being potent, as in God has the strength or power to create, not that he has the potentiality to create. That is not what is being said. So let's go back to St. Maximus, right? God is one without first principle. So this whole idea of we talked about this in St. Simeon. My candle fell down. I apologize. A little startled the dogs as well. Let me return. We talked about this in St. Simeon, where there is no first, second, or third. There's no sequence. There's no series. Okay. So here, there's no first principle. St. Maximus is very, very clear. God is one without first principle. Okay, this is why in the other translation it says God is one unoriginate. Now notice he says God, not the Father is unoriginate. He says God is unoriginate. Okay, so because there is no first principle, we can't sit here and say that the Father is uncaused and the Son is caused and the Spirit is caused, as though different parts of God are caused and other parts are uncaused, because now we have a schizophrenic God, right? God is one being, uncaused, unoriginate, simple, wholly simple, okay? Incomprehensible throughout being the total potentiality of being, okay? The total power, right? He excludes absolutely the concept of temporal and qualified existence. Well, that's easy to get, since he is inaccessible to everyone, right? And the rest of this is fairly normal. But let's go to also 1.3. Each substance, including in its own definition in itself, is a first principle. Okay, so what does that mean? Right. So again, the substance. What is substance? Substance is the Latin for substantia, or sorry, English for the Latin word substantia, which is the word used for nature. Okay, for feces. Subsistence is the word used for person or hypostasis. Okay, but substance, like I have a human substance, that is my nature. Okay, so substance, the nature, is the first principle. Okay, of every being. So the being's nature is its first principle, not its person. Okay, so again, St. Maximus, we've talked about this before. St. Maximus in Ambigua 1 talks about how we first come to understand things by their nature, by their subsistence, and then we understand things by the mode. Sorry, we come to understand things by their substance, and then we come to understand things by the mode of that substance, which is the subsistence, right? The particular way in which that substance is existing. Okay, and I'm in my way. I'm human is existing in me, right? As me, right? And I'm existing as it. So again, he's echoing himself here. All right, each substance, including its own definition in itself, is a first principle by nature productive of the movement, discernment, and potentiality in it. Okay, so he's talking about essence and energy. But again, the nature is the first principle. Now, we're not talking about that in God because there is no first principle, right? He is without first principle. So neither is the Father first principle, nor is the essence first principle. This whole idea that, the Latins and the Thomists say that the essence is first principle, and we say that the Father is first principle, both are wrong, just wrong. There is no first principle, okay? Because again, as St. Simeon said, the persons are not sequent to either each other or to themselves, right? So there's no way that the Father could be prior or anterior to his own essence. Again, because there was no first principle, unoriginate. God is one, unoriginate. Okay, the divinity is one, unoriginate. We can't be dividing up God into these parts and say, well, this part of God is unoriginate, but this part of God is not. That's not what we're doing. Okay, so again, apologize for the candle. I just put those up. You have to put them up again. Continue to read St. Maximus. I'll probably do another video pretty soon, and God bless.